I mess it up every time. It's Genarses. So while they're going, we see in verse 36 that the people are still following them. Right, verse 36 says, and the reason we know that, it says, it took with them the boats, and the other boats were with him, meaning the other boats were with him, following him, to continue listening to Jesus. But again, he had went to sleep, so eventually those boats fade away, they go back to shore, and then it's just the disciples and Jesus on this boat. And when we keep reading, we'll read in verse 37 about, it says, a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. So, I don't know if any of y'all has anybody here ever been to Galilee? Okay, me neither. But anyways, if you look up, we have Google now. And so Google teaches you a lot of stuff. So if you go to the Sea of Galilee, there is the section where the sea is at, it is 700 foot below sea level. And so what that means is, the sea's got this, it's the average spot of the average height of the sea. This place is 700 foot below it. But all around the place is above is mountains everywhere. And these mountains are 1,500 plus feet above sea level. So if you have a place that's below sea level and then it's surrounded by something above sea level, storms are going to be very common. So it wasn't, whenever we hear about storms here, it's not unlikely for them to happen. Storms are very frequent, and it's just like, it reminds me of summer storms. You can be outside working, and all of a sudden, just like that, a storm comes up. It starts pouring rain, it starts thunder, lightning. But this storm was different, because we have to put in perspective. So back in these times, if you think about it, all the disciples were fishermen, with the exception of, I think it was 3. It's 2 or 3. So they worked on a boat since they were able to walk, since they were able to work. So they knew what to do if a storm came. What should I do? We should throw stuff off the boat, make the boat lighter. They knew how to work a boat. They knew how to steer a boat. Excuse me. Because again, fishing was their livelihood. So scholars believe this storm is not a normal storm. If we went all the way back to Jonah, so the book of Jonah, it says that it is believed that this storm mimics the same one that was in Jonah. Meaning that it was overwhelming, and it even says the boat starts filling. So in other words, it's a bad storm. If you're an experienced sailor, you're still worried about this. So, Jesus knew about this storm, because we can all agree Jesus is the Son of God, so he knows everything. So Jesus still knew about this storm, but he still led the disciples in it. He was not afraid of the storm. Jesus was not taken by surprise. Right? If we read, we can keep reading. So we'll go and read 37. It says, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking to the boat, so the boat was filling. But he, or Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. So while this huge, massive storm's going on, again, I think about the story of Jonah. Jonah was asleep in the boat. Everybody, I imagine everybody up there flipping out. They're all screaming. The boat's starting to sink a little bit. And Jesus is just asleep. He's not worried about it. He had a long day, so he's tired. So, if Jesus is sleeping in this storm, why should we be worried about storms in our lives? If nothing catches God off guard, why are we caught off guard when unexpected things happen in our lives? When things that we don't, excuse me, y'all. When things don't go our way, when something changes, a lot of times it can make us fall apart in our lives, can't it? We can see it, and it'll throw a wrench in our plans. I don't know about y'all, I like routine. I wake up about the same time every morning. I do the same things in the morning. I eat breakfast. I do whatever I'm going to do at the house. I go to work, do whatever I'm going to do there, and then I do the same thing every day. Sometimes if something changes, if something happens, sometimes that irritates me a little bit. Right? Like if I'm driving and then there's a tree in the road. I'm like, man, what the heck, dude? Now I got to go around, I got to drive, and sometimes I let that stuff, and that's, of course, little stuff, but I let that stuff I can't control, let it bother me and irritate me. But we see that Jesus doesn't let anything like that happen. Jesus knew the storm was coming, but his disciples are caught off guard, right? They're like, well, what do we do? So we keep reading, and we see And first, before we read any more, though, I want to highlight that when we see Jesus sleeping, that also shows us, because it's important to know that Jesus is God, but he's also man. So when the Bible talks about it, he is called the Son of God or the Son of Man. And we see that by there's some essential things that all of us do. Two of the big things are we eat and we sleep. I don't know about any of y'all, but I get a little cranky when I don't get a lot of sleep. I can get very, irritated. I can get very irritated quickly if I don't have a lot of sleep. So, Jesus, this is also showing us, this is just a little, I don't want to say a side note because it's important. We see in the Bible, we see Jesus do multiple things that are of human nature. So, we know he eats, we know he sleeps, but he also cries, and we see him cry in the Bible. So he hungers, he thirsts, he cries, and he dies. Those are all things that all of us do at some point in our life. Excuse me. So, while Jesus is sleeping, he's not worried about anything, and the disciples they're stressful and they're worried. They end up waking Jesus up. They say, teacher. And so when they say teacher, it was meant as a sign of respect. Because, nowadays if you say teacher, you're most time talking to somebody who's your teacher. It's not. But back then, to be a student of someone was a very honorable thing. It was something to learn from them. They were your mentor. And so he says, teacher, they said, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Do you not care that we are dying? So when I was reading that, I was thinking about it. You can do a lot of, I don't know, have any of y'all ever done anything that was not the smartest thing to do and you're like, wow, I'm lucky I got through that. And a lot of stuff, I knew this fella, and so this is I'm going to tell you, I like telling stories, so I get a little sidetracked sometimes. So I knew this fella, and he said, well, I was driving the other day. He came, so y'all know I used to work at a Shell station in Kershaw. So we put on tires. And this fella, I done told him for the past 2 months, I said, it looks like somebody put a piece of tinfoil on your tire and taped it on there. I mean, wires were showing everywhere. And I don't know if any of y'all ever had a tire blowout on you, but if you have one blow out, you typically want your back tire to blow out. And I told him, I said, if you're not going to get a tire, I said, we'll at least put it on the back. Because, as soon as you lose that tire that makes you steer, if your left tire goes, you're going left. If your right tire goes, you're going right. But he never, he said, I'm going to get one eventually. Again, it's a couple months later. He comes back. He's driving a new car. I said, man, you got your new tires? He said, yeah, my tire blew out on me. I said, I could have told you that. I mean, it's not that complicated. So, as his tire blew out, again, it was that steer tire, so he's going, and immediately he was telling me about it. There was a car coming, and the tire blew out, and he said he just barely missed it. His exact words, because he does go to church, he said, the Lord knew that it was not my time to go. I said, yeah. I said, you got pretty lucky. Always telling you don't be that dumb again. One or the other. So, while thinking about that, Jesus knew that it wasn't his time to go yet. Jesus was not worried. So Lottie Moon said this. She said, I have a firm conviction that I'm immortal until my work is done. So if we take that quote to our lives, that would take us saying that we are all essentially immortal until our work that Jesus has designed us to do is finished. And again, Jesus knew that his work was not finished. He knew that he had not died on the cross yet, so he was not worried about the storm. So we keep reading, and it says, so Jesus awoke, and he rebuked the wind and the sea, and he said, peace, be still. And the wind immediately ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear, excuse me, and said to one another, who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? So that goes to my next point. When we become fearful, we lose faith a lot of times. We look throughout the Bible. We see the first story I immediately thought of is a pretty popular story when Peter walks on the water. So Peter is, there are only two people that ever walked on water. It was Peter and Jesus. So as Peter was walking, he was doing good, right? As long as he was focused on Jesus. He locked eyes with him. He started walking. But immediately, then he started hearing the wind howl. He started hearing the sea, and he became worried. He lost his faith. He became fearful. And because of that, he started sinking. And so again, this story is very similar. We see the disciples, they're stressing out and worried about something they can't control. We do that a lot of times, don't we? There could be something going on in New England, and we're like, man, dude, did y'all hear about that? And we make that the central focus of our day. We worry about these things that we can't change. And because of that, because the disciples did that, they wake up Jesus. And immediately the first thing they don't say is, hey, there's a storm. What should we do? They said, you don't care that we're dying? Jesus, so you don't care about me. And how many times do we do that? How many times do we say, well, God, do you not care? I've already been through all this. Why are you doing this? We end up questioning God. But again, God and Jesus, we see throughout the whole entire Bible, he's proven to be faithful, hasn't he? God's made promises and he's made covenants with hundreds of thousands of people. And none of them have ever been broken. So why do we think he's going to break the promises, the covenants that he has with us? When I think about God's faithfulness, the first person I think about is Abraham. People talk about, the joy of having kids and everything. And I mean, I do, kids are joyful, but I couldn't imagine having a kid at 100. That sounds terrible. Could you imagine being 100 years old and having a newborn? That would be a life change. But we see that God is still faithful. And Abraham, you even see that Abraham and his wife laughed at God. They said, God, because y'all read about this because Zach's been going through the Genesis. So, he ended up, Sarah and Abraham at one point laughed at God, said, God, I'm 100. At the time he wasn't 100, he was in his 90s. But he said, I'm old. My wife is 99, and she's supposed to have a kid. And so they took matters in their own hands. And that's what we do oftentimes. And so when he took matters into his own hands, he went with a servant girl. And because of that, we see that if you look back, it is actually believed that Ishmael is the founder of the people of Islam. So that is the sworn enemy of the Israelites or the Jewish people. Excuse me. So because of his sin, because of the sin and the distrust that Abraham had, he created that enemy. And the same thing's for us. Right? We say, well, God, I've got a better solution. I've got a better idea that we can do. I mean, your idea and your ways, okay, but we can do it by this. We can fast track it. It's like a fast pass. Right? Zach's at Disney. I imagine he probably bought a fast pass so he ain't got to wait 2 hours in line. Because it's more convenient, right? And we think, well, if it gets done quicker, it's better, it's more convenient, and I don't have to worry about it. So we see that Jesus is proven to be faithful, the same as God. He is time and time again with the disciples. They have seen him work miracles. They've seen him do something that only somebody sent from God, only the Son of God can do. But yet they still doubt him. And just like just like God did to Abraham, God still fulfilled his promise. He still said, hey, look, you weren't supposed to do it like this, but your wife Sarah is still going to have a son. So, if the disciples would have instead of cast blame, because we can all agree the disciples cast blame on Jesus. We said, this is your fault. You're supposed to be this knowing person, and because of this, you sent us out here to die. Why couldn't we have died on land? I imagine there's probably a lot of shouting, yelling, and they're worried. And the disciples do what we do a lot of times. We forget how powerful Jesus is. Again, we let those storms, we let those circumstances happen to us, and instead of saying, well, you know what, my God's got this, we say, well, you know what, God, where'd you go? What have you done? So we go to verse 39, and so Jesus awoke. So at first, when Jesus wakes up, we don't see him rebuke the disciples. We don't hear him say, I don't know, any of y'all like being woken up? Like if you're sleeping, if you're taking a good nap, somebody wakes you up, it's not the best feeling, right? If you have to wake up and go somewhere that you've been sleeping good and your alarm goes off for work, sometimes you don't want to get up. But we don't see Jesus say, look, I need 5 more minutes. Y'all go figure it out. Look, I know there's a storm, but man, That pillow right there is really soft. I was sleeping really good. I've had a long day. So he says 3 words. Instead of rebuking the disciples, he gets up and it says, he rebukes the sea, It says 3 words. He says, peace, be still. I don't know about any of y'all, but the rain happening outside, I can't say peace, be still, and the rain stop. I can say, you know what, I'm tired of it raining. Clint's scared of thunder and lightning, so I'm going to tell the storm to stop and everything be fine, so that way Clint won't worry about it. No. Again, think about Psalms 107. Jesus has that authority because he is God. We see that only God has the authority to command the waves and the wind. To me, this is a perfect example of God's creation at its finest. We see everything around us, and there's certain stuff we can control in God's creation. I can control how tall my grass gets. If I don't cut my grass all summer, it's going to be pretty bad, ain't it? I'm going to have to get somebody out there. I don't know what I'd do, but it'd be tall. I have to cut my grass about every week as it gets tall. It'd probably be about to my hip. But there's also things we can't control. I can't control the temperature outside. So sometimes when it's summertime, I used to roof some. And if you ever get slow in the roofing business, you're going to pick up in the summertime, let me tell you. And they're going to want, if it's a tin roof, I promise you they're going to want black tin, and it's going to be hot. And I say, man, it's just 95. It's not bad. They're sitting down there. They just got out of the air conditioned house. They sipping a cold drink. They got a nice glass of tea. And I said, man, it's not too bad, is it? I said, no, it's fine up here. It's about the same. But I can't control the temperature. If God all of a sudden said, you know what, we don't need the sun anymore, he can take the sun away. If he said, it's going to be 20 degrees in South Carolina all year round, he could do that. God has the authority to do that. So again, we see Jesus' authority over the wind and the sea, the same as his Father's. And so, verse 40, then he turns to deal with the disciples. So he calms the sea, he calms the issue. So Jesus does that in our lives. It's just like if we look at the I am statements of Jesus. One, he says, I'm the vine, meaning, and what that means is, apart from him, we cannot do anything. You can't bear fruit, just like Hunter was talking about bearing fruit. So Jesus says, look, if you don't know me, you're not part of the vine. I don't know, do any of y'all have, I know Troy does. Troy, do you have, with your school stuff, do you have like plants? Do y'all do any kind of plants? So if Troy's, let's say Troy's got muscadines. I don't know if any of y'all like muscadines, but a very important part of them is they got to be on the vine. Troy can't cut a branch off and stick it in the ground, or just put it on his counter and just hope for fruit to come about. You have to be connected. So just like we have to be connected to God, he says, why are you so afraid? You still have no faith. They didn't have faith. They were not connected with God at this moment. They didn't understand the severity of who Jesus was. Right? Their true faith did not come. Their trust in Jesus, they didn't believe, they knew who Jesus was, but they didn't truly understand it and believe it until after the cross. Until after Jesus had died for them and rose on the third day. Because somebody says that, it's a little confusing, right? Jesus talks about, well, I'm going to die, and 3 days later I'm going to rise again. That's a little confusing. That's one of the things, I believe it when it happens. So when we believe that when it happens, and it did, we know that there's an empty tomb. If we go, there's no other religion that says there's no empty tomb of Muhammad, there's no empty tomb of Buddha, there's only the empty tomb of Jesus Christ. And so when we see that, when we see that in the Bible, there's physical signs, again, we have an empty tomb, that shows the power of Jesus, and there's no exception for us, right? We know that Jesus is all-powerful. We know that he conquered death, so we should put our trust in him in all of our trials. Because the Bible tells us we're going to have trials. If we read in James, so James talks about it, he's the half-brother of Jesus, and he says, look, life ain't going to be easy. Just because you get saved, that don't mean we're going to have sunshine and rainbows. You aren't going to have a campfire with Jesus and sing Kumbaya all the time. It's going to be aggravating, it's going to be tough, and it's going to be rough. But because of that, God will bless you through it. God will bless you through those storms. So, if you look at the growth of Christianity, I just thought about this. So, the Christian faith is growing very popular in China, meaning it's spreading extremely fast. And I don't know if any of y'all know what's going on in China, but the people of China do not like Christians. They're heavily persecuted. But somehow there's still growth, right? We see in the Bible that even through persecution there's growth. And the reason that is because the people who are getting persecuted, they still recognize the faithfulness of God. They see that, hey, look, I might die tomorrow for my faith. It might be 30 years. I might, stay wherever I'm at and teaching for 30 years before I die. But over all these trials, Jesus is faithful. And through those trials, I don't know, I imagine, all of us have been through trials. So through those trials, it provides us perseverance. It gives our faith, it makes our faith stronger. When something bad happens, a lot of times people come together, correct? I mean, the first thing I think about just as a country, when 9/11 happened, we can all agree there was a boost in nationalism, wasn't there? People were helping people were doing all this. Well, it's the same in our faith. And to me, it normally wouldn't make sense. Well, if you're getting persecuted, you should have less growth. But the more persecution that happens, the wider the gospel of Jesus spreads. So we go and we see that Jesus has this power. He has this authority to get us through any storms. And then he asks, why are you still afraid? And that question, instead of saying, you of little faith, put your name in there. Put your name at the beginning. Dean, why are you still afraid? You've seen what I've done. You've seen all the miracles that I performed. John writes at the end of the book, he said there's so many miracles Jesus did, there's not a book in the world that can pertain all of them. So just put your name in it. Dean, why do you still doubt me? Why are you worried about this situation? Why are you afraid? Why do you still have no faith in me at all? Do you not remember what I've done for you throughout your entire life? How I've been there and provided for you throughout everything? So, as Jesus asked that question, the last verse, I really enjoy it. It says, they were filled with great fear. So the disciples were afraid. They were frightened. And they said to one another, who is this that even the wind and the sea obey them? So, we see again the disciples are terrified or filled with fear. And the reason they were is because it's the same way, I hear people all the time, man, I'm so excited to see Jesus. If Jesus walked in here right now, I would just love it. I'm not going to lie to y'all. The first thing I would probably think about if Jesus walked through those doors, like, dang, I just lied like 5 minutes ago, and Jesus just showed up. It's like one of those things, like when you get caught doing something you're not supposed to, and it's kind of, it's that awkward moment, because he knows. So they knew who they were in the presence of. They're starting to, this is one of the first times we see in Scripture that they're understanding who they are in the presence of. They're understanding that Jesus is the Son of God. And so as they're understanding this, again, being in the presence of God is frightening. And if we were to walk outside in the pouring rain and I said, peace be still, and the rain stopped, y'all might be a little scared of me if I can just, say, you know what, I'm tired of it raining, let's just stop the rain. That's frightening, right? When we see that they are curious, they said, who is this? Who is this man? Who is this man that is so close to God, that is so powerful, that even the wind and the sea obey him? And again, we go in Psalms, we go to Exodus, we go to all these places where God has authority over the sea, right? God split the sea for Moses. God calmed the storm for Jonah whenever they threw Jonah overboard. Jesus calmed the sea here. There's multiple times where Jesus calms the sea just the same as God did. So they recognize his power. They say, well, you know what? We're kind of scared of this guy now. Not in a frightening way, but it's just like when you're in the presence of somebody, if the head department person, wherever you work at, if he comes, you're going to be a little nervous, right? Like, sometimes if you mess up, it's just like, hey, man, it happens sometimes. But when somebody's over there watching you and observing you, and, they got it. The worst for me is, man, when they take out like a little notebook. You ever had somebody do that? And they could be drawing stick men for all you know. But they look like they're writing down. I'm like, man, what is this person writing about? You know? And you try to focus, but then you glance back and you just see that person looking up, writing. And a lot of times, I don't know what it is, but they don't look happy. Right? I don't know if you ever experienced that, but they look like they're sucking on a lemon. And the reason you like that is because you know the power that person has. And so it's the same way, we ought to treat Jesus the same way. We know the power Jesus has, and I feel like sometimes as Christians, I know I do it, for instance, sometimes I forget about how powerful Jesus is. I forget, like, hey, if Jesus wanted to right now, I could, we look I'm thinking about the New Testament real quick. In Acts, there was a couple, and so they said, all right, we're going to bring everything before God. And they said, it was a husband and wife, they said, well, you know what? We'll give 90% of our stuff, but we're going to keep a little bit back for us. So when they did that, what happened is they were confronted. They said, God told them to give everything. And he told Peter, so he called the husband in first. He said, hey, no, we gave everything. Immediately he struck dead. And the same thing happened with the wife. Immediately she struck dead. God has the power. Think about all the disobedience we do to God. And it's not that we can hide it from. It's not like, look, it was just me. Nobody else knows about it. God always knows. And God has the ultimate authority to say, hey, look, you deserve to be struck dead right now. And we all do. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But we forget. We forget about that. Who is this that the wind and sea obey him? We forget, who is this powerful God? Right? Sometimes we forget that. We forget, who is Jesus? That's a simple question, right? And there's a lot of different answers. Some people say, well, Jesus was a really good teacher. He was a good person. He performed miracles. He helped all these people. But who is Jesus to us, right? And do we truly realize the weight that carries? He's the Son of God. He's our intercessor. The Bible tells, we're talking about in Sunday school, so there's only one unforgivable sin, and that's not accepting Jesus as your Savior. That is not allowing the Holy Spirit to come in you. So, do we truly recognize that? That like Jesus is our ultimate mediator? We recognize that Jesus has the same power as God? So the disciples recognized who Jesus was. And when they did that, we have to realize we have to do the same thing. Who is Jesus in our life? Is he a random guy we hear about at church? Is he somebody we've heard about since we were little, so he's just, he's Jesus? Or do we recognize him when we say, Jesus is my Lord and Savior? He is the one who has ultimate authority over everything. And so to end, I kind of want to think about this. Right? Who are we putting our faith in? Who do we constantly put our faith in? Do you put your faith in your spouse? Do you put your faith in your coworkers at work? Or are you putting your faith in Jesus? Does anybody have any questions about anything? I know Zach said y'all usually do questions. Anybody? Not all at once. Excuse me. So, I want to encourage y'all too, if you have not read the book of Mark, it's a great book to read. So if anybody doesn't have any questions, Troy, would you pray for us, please? Amen.